we had the protest at Old Trafford yesterday. Here I was, sitting in front of the TV, waiting for a match to be played, and it just never kicked off. Sunday afternoon entertainment ruined, ya bastards. Was there a point
Absolutely
of the
ruined.
movement? Well, I'm taking the piss. Obviously, 100%. There's definitely a reason for them to protest. I'm 100% behind the true spirit of it. Like, what the Glazers tried to do with the Super League
Mm.
is completely out of order. So I just want to emphasize this point to anyone listening that I'm not a United supporter because I don't buy the merch, I don't pay for MUTV, I don't go to the matches of like even when COVID wasn't a thing. But I am a follower, but I'm humble enough to admit that these other fans, they absolutely have every right to be angry. This is bigger than being in the football tribalism thing. I think every football fan should be behind this message because they threatened to cut the head of the football industry
Hmm.
with the Super League.
Hmm.
And I know other clubs were involved, but some key owners pushed for this movement, and the Glazers were
Yeah.
definitely one.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of the Glazer family, with Man United, so they've bought a club with a loan, and then apparently they transferred the entire debt
Yeah.
to the club. Basically, no money being spent on their behalf,
Yeah.
and also the transfer fees were generated by club's revenue only. So they've never invested a single penny into the club.
So I'm glad you said that and broke it down so simply because a lot of people really don't get the reason for the protests. They think, oh, it's because they're not winning anything. And why are you complaining when you're paying so much money for players? And it's really not
Right.
that simple because there were protests long before United as a team were unsuccessful. And like on an ethical note, them coming in to just take money out to make up for their debt and then putting the club in debt and then
Yeah.
paying like exorbitant amounts on has-been players, but singular has-been players to give the impression that you're investing when that's like just a needle drop out of the revenue that United brings is a spit in the face to the fans. And a lot of fans were complicit in it because Ferguson, is like a genius manager and made it work and was still kind of keeping the trophies winning. But even towards the end of the reign, you could tell like the transfer tactics were a bit questionable when Ronaldo left, when Tevez left. So like two of the best in the front trident of the Champions League winning team, they replaced them with what? Obertan, Valencia, Michael Owen, what for peanuts, basically. It was already like questionable from the start. The protests from like 2005 were huge. David Beckham protested when he came back as a AC Milan player, put the green and gold scarf around his neck. Like high profile players actually stood against it. Eric Cantona did. A whole ass football club was started as a replacement for United as a result of the Glazers owning them. So various forms of protests have been attempted, and the Super League thing really just pushed people over the line because that was categorically too far. They've gone too far.
Yeah. Agree. I mean, yeah.
No, you go on.
Go on, finish your sentence. Okay.
I didn't know yet.
I mean, okay. So I think what this protest tells us is that the sort of core idea and value of football itself have sort of been diluted over the past decade.
Yeah.
Like ever since those billionaires from Middle East and America, since they made acquisitions of these clubs, I think football has become more of a business, and they sort of see the fans as commodities.
The issue here with all of the clubs, with like Real Madrid's president Perez, for instance, they all act like with the Super League thing, they're kind of doing us fans a favor by taking the mask off because football is always a business to them, and us fans kind of kidded ourselves for so long by saying it isn't because we put a lot of trust in the owners to be, good custodians to the club, and we kind of had to trust them because people love their clubs. It's very hard to go against something you love. It's like they owned the club and they weren't regulated to put the fans' interests first, but we sort of had to trust them because that's how the system worked, and the government never really stepped in to do anything until it got this far. Now people are talking about 50+1. I'd have that over it. The idea that someone can come into like Man City and buy the team and make them amazing, I'm totally for that. That's the spirit of like competition, but like there should be a spending cap, there should be a salary cap. Like these things, they protect the game from like eating itself, and with these owners in charge, I doubt it would ever happen. With the power they've been allowed to grasp like already.
But I feel like they've misused that power because, first of all, they made a big mistake by exploiting the fans because, after all, football clubs can never exist without the fans.
No, it just goes against like the values of. It's disappointing for all the clubs involved in for different ways, but like in terms of like traditional values, Liverpool and United and like Arsenal just behind there, like they were built on like workers and shipyard workers. There was like a strong working class ethos, like Shankly,
Yeah.
Fergie. They all had like strong working class values, and fans felt like they watched something they related to, not the prawn sandwich brigade, unlike us. But and then that meaning got stripped away like year by year. We still pretended that it was the same. We hoped that it was the same. With that Super League, it was just completely pulled off, and categorically it was not the same anymore. And they had the audacity to act like they were doing us a favor by pulling it off, because this is how it is the whole time.
Yeah, right. Doing them a favor, more like trying to make some money off it.
Yeah, like they're just that out of touch, honestly. Like with the FSG apology video as well, it just shows like how dumb they think the fans are.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of these apology videos or apology letters, I don't quite understand how these owners expect us to genuinely like accept these as an apology.
Gary Neville had like the best quote I've seen on it. He said, "You can't really rebuild something that isn't there. The trust was never there with the Glazers. I don't know."
No, there was never a trust. No.
We have to say this. The protests yesterday, unfortunately, as with all protests, it was not a perfect. There were a fraction of it that seemed to show up just to take selfies, to kick a ball around, and just got excited by the prospect of being on the Old Trafford grass and just, start messing about. And like it went to violence and property destruction, and there was like elements of hooliganism, and that we'd have to denounce, right? Like I can't get behind that at all.
Totally.
That's disgusting, and people that did that should be ashamed of themselves, because their actions are going to be used to cascade the entire movement, and it'll be diluted. And Sky Sports is very prone to doing things like that when it's in their self-interest.
Right.
So when the Super League stuff happened and Chelsea fans were protesting and Leeds fans were protesting, they were completely for it. They were on the same side then. If the Super League happened, Sky Sports may lose the Premier League. Of course, they'd be for the outrage, even though there was property destruction and harassment back then as well, but they just didn't talk about it. Now, all of a sudden, when one of their games is cancelled, they're crying about it. So
because they lost money.
Yeah, so we can't forget that Sky Sports are one of the bad guys as well. It's like picking your poison. They're not one of the good guys.
No, I love watching Sky Sports, but
I love watching Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher and some of the others.
Oh yeah.
But like as an institution, they're kind of rotten. They're responsible for like some of the kickoff times that like Klopp has complained about. They just act like they're not, but because like the game going towards the ironically, prawn sandwich brigade, that's been happening for a long time. Like the fan in the stadium that only shows up once a year, they want that fan instead of the local fan that shows up all the time, that won't buy it. The formation of the Premier League, as much as we enjoy watching it, the point of that kind of was to exploit that. The money-making side of it is maybe the slippery slope that got to where we are today. So for Sky to get on their high horse and take the moral high ground is very ironic, and for them to not back the United supporters, protesters, to me is very hypocritical.
I agree with you.
Whether or not this is their intention, it makes them look like they're siding with the Glazers, and the Glazers do not need that kind of airtime on TV. People don't need to be convinced that the Glazers should stay in it.
I mean, Sky Sports does have the guilt, the responsibilities for it. But I don't know. I think this whole situation will be solved if the Glazer family goes away.
Yeah, it starts with the Glazers going away.
Simple as that.
I don't know if they're the worst ones. I can't speak for Kroenke. He's despised as well. Your Liverpool owners as well. Like one of them took money out of the club as well, as far as I know, and they barely go to games. Like with the rivalry, like the audacity of having like a statement being published on a Liverpool website with Joe Glazer's name on it. A lot of Liverpool fans can't get their head around that. They found it really hard to like forgive that. So
that's disappointing.
I mean, as a collective thing, I feel like the football community now has to like show some unity. And when it comes to discussions about this, they kind of have to put the banter aside. And even if they didn't succeed, like just talking about it alone was diabolical, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we do need this kind of Avengers moment where everyone sort of assembles.
Yeah, like if Arsenal fans like protested Kroenke at the Emirates, I'd be for them as well.
Oh,
So it's not a United thing.
no, it's everywhere. All the clubs are involved in it.
Yeah, and then we should probably talk about what the fair system is for having owners in these football clubs, and
Yeah, yeah.
maybe Germany is the way to go.
Bundesliga really manages really well, I think.
Yeah.
They've dealt with the whole Super League situation really well.
Well, I don't know if they were invited. Maybe they were, and they just flat out said no. But the Super League claims that they were never invited.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't
Oh,
make sense. Like, if you're gonna call yourself a Super League, there's no way Bayern Munich isn't in there.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's a huge club,
Yeah, there's no way Bayern Munich
Hmm.
isn't in there, but Spurs are.
right?
Ridiculous. I don't even.
Oh, so interesting.
Anyways, like, with all the violence being broadcast and the way people are like sneering at this movement from their ivory towers and saying, oh yeah, like, you shouldn't protest, like, I completely get it, but
Yep,
it's kind of
same here.
like subtracting from the point a bit. It's like we have to denounce the violence, but like, do people in England even know how to protest? Like, how many how many protests here have like resorted to violence? Where I come from, Hong Kong always does like peaceful protests.
Right.
And there's also the notion that you can't have a protest that's peaceful ever. Like, I keep hearing that so much, but it's happened before. Like, Gandhi and the salt marches, they're not a single drop of blood happened from that.
It just goes to show, like, hooliganism in the UK still exists.
Yeah,
and it's very
definitely.
serious. And this is horrible. Like, you're putting everyone in danger, like, including like the club staff and all that. And also, like, they shouldn't really like use violence against the police because they're not just like punching bags or anything. They're just trying to do their job. And I think some of them agree with the protest as well.
Yeah.
And I think the fans are, well, the ones who used violence. I think they were just trying to get out their anger as a sort of statement.
I heard this the other time, like, from like this British friend I have. Like, he was talking about how, like, British dads tend to be a bit emotionally unintelligent. They don't really know how to talk about their feelings, and they kind of like brush things under the rug, and they don't like talk about things. Like, they just stay away from emotions. Like, why is that? I don't really get it. But then we were like, maybe that's why there's such a release of emotion in sports culture, because like they
Wow,
don't
that's
release their emotions. So like with the football teams, they get so crazy with it,
Yeah.
and
It's
like
like
this,
venting out. And
yeah, and the UK's record of hooliganism, even internationally, like Heysay, several times in the Euros, England fans, Irish fans, they behave pretty poorly, I have
yeah,
to
that's
say.
true.
Hooliganism is an actual problem in the UK, but that shouldn't overshadow the message.
No.
Gotta make that absolutely. Before anyone tips the scales on the dislike button down below, please don't do that. Be nice. We have kids to feed.
I think this is like this is the point where everyone should be active thinkers. They should think critically about what's going on and the situation. We shouldn't just absorb the information, accept how it is. I think everyone should start to have this mindset where you want to challenge something. For example, the club owners.
Exactly. Instead of doing that, we see a lot of people coming out and misusing this to, fulfill whatever agenda they had. Like, we see a lot of West Ham and Liverpool fans crawling out of their caves on Twitter saying things like, oh, if we done that at, I don't know, Anfield, we'd be branded thugs, when they have no proof of that. It's like, why come out now and say this? It's so not constructive. Like, it's kind of missing the point of what's going on, because this affects you as well. Yeah, so a lot of people use this for, like, their own agenda, like that quote you talked about. That Big Zoo quote.
Yeah.
One of the talking points, right, is that fans have many channels to make their views known. And that's like a quote lifted right out of Sky. That's true, but none of them have worked so far. And people that expect the protest to be completely convenient don't understand what a protest is. And I'm not advocating for violence, but direct action, I completely understand. I can't advocate for law breaking either, but I can understand the idea that you have to cause an inconvenience to get someone's attention. They definitely caused an inconvenience yesterday. Honestly, on a personal note, I do not care that the game was postponed, because whilst I missed my Sunday entertainment, it may mean this sends shockwaves around the world in terms of like, wow, these fans are really pissed off at these owners, and it's been a long time coming. And in the words of Jamie Carragher, who I have a lot of respect for saying this, he said they brought it on themselves, and they honestly have.
It's their fault. It's their fault. There's no other explanation to this. The shocking thing is, this is like the first time in the history of football an EPL match has been like postponed because of a fan protest.
Yeah.
So this is quite groundbreaking.
Yeah, and it's like that. They're kind of branding it as a sad day in football. No, the sad day in football was the Super League. being announced a few weeks ago.
Mm,
That
yeah.
that was maybe the most depressed I ever felt about, this entire industry. Like, as much as, like, I used to be really into United, and I grew up and have a job and I was busy, I have things to do. I
Mhm.
couldn't just follow the team all the time. Those memories stick with you, the good memories you had of that team. I remember supporting them with my granddad, watching the TV together, and like
Mhm.
with United and Liverpool as well, right? The history is steeped in the UEFA Champions League, European Cup,
Yeah, of course.
like Liverpool winning it what, like 4 times before the 2000s and then twice again after the millennium. It's like steep in their history. And with United, they were the first British team the first English team to do it. Celtic apparently won it before us. Would you know? There used to be a good
Really.
team. The whole Matt Busby story, when the whole plane of players nearly died, almost all of them
Oh,
got wiped out trying to win that competition, and then 10 years later coming back with a new team and actually winning it and being the first team in England to win it. That's like a romantic story.
yeah.
And so that trophy is so seminal in the story of that club, and it's why I fell in love with that club.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how many trophies we win, it's that story, it's the ethos of fulfilling the potential of everyone that died on that plane. And when you have the Super League, that trophy gets taken away. We may never compete in that trophy again. Everything Matt Busby worked for and Ferguson worked for, it's kind of like stripped away. It's a spit in the face to the history.
I
Like, the
agree. Yeah.
Champions League is not perfect. It definitely needs reform, right? But
Yeah, of course.
to start from scratch in that manner in a closed shop is so out of order. Keep repeating myself. I can't stress enough how disgusting that decision is.
I think many people will agree with you on that.
I hope other fans do. It's not just about the Champions League. It's about like the Premier League as well. Like, the Premier League gets turned into the League Cup basically because like they'll be fielding academy players. The top players would be playing in fucking Dubai against PSG and then coming back after losing 8-0.
If the clubs play for Super League, they are not allowed to play in the league as well, no?
They're
The
not
Premier League.
allowed to. Legally, they're not allowed to, but they wanted to. That's what they were saying. And if they were
Mhm.
allowed to, they wouldn't have been playing the same players. It would not have been Arsenal playing. It would
No,
have
of
been,
course not.
Arsenal under 20s. And that's just like the Premier League's history completely slashed. And it probably won't last very long after that.
No, not really.
For people to act like there was no reason for this outrage, they were living under a rock, because this building up for some time now, and until it reached like a crescendo with that whole fiasco. And I can completely understand why some people stopped supporting their clubs entirely over it. I still support the players, the manager. They've done enough to show that they are categorically against. They had nothing to do with the decision-making process. So something's still there for me to follow. The people in the boardroom, they have to get out.
They didn't even tell people about the Super League out of nowhere.
Ridiculous.
How does that make us feel as fans? I thought it was like April Fool's news or something.
Those 2 days were like the strangest days as a football follower, honestly.
Mm.
We were just left in the lull, like, what the hell is happening? And then the managers, like, were just hung out to dry to face the media, having known about it for like less than 12 hours. I just hope we can still spin this into something positive and reframe this message as something to the Glazers, as this all happened because of you, in spite of the very unsanitary violence yesterday that we still do not condone, because of what they did, because of what they tried to take part in. And the main disappointment I have is that many future protests from fans now would be largely monitored because of the actions of the few idiots today. The guards at Old Trafford apparently just let everyone in because they weren't paid enough or whatever. It just exposed more like problems at Old Trafford. I remember rats showing up at like the grass a few times watching it on TV. It's just like a disgusting picture. It's just a rotten stadium full of rats and stuff. Not talking about Ryan Giggs, by the way. So anyways, it just exposed a lot of problems. So, and hopefully we can focus on those problems and all get behind this message, because I know it's annoying in the short term, but in the long run, we will be thankful for getting them out. And we need to crack a few eggs, make an omelette, as they say.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think this could be a start of a new chapter in football. I think the first step it requires is kicking the Glazer family out. That's the initial step, and I hope the owners will learn from this and they just sort of open their eyes